Human design is a part science, part spiritual system that tells you who you came here to be. You have your own blueprint, your own way of becoming successful, your own way your dreams are going to come true, the way you'll experience the most joy and fulfillment. The instruction manual for how to move through the world is custom to you. When you act according to that manual, when you act as the real you, everything in life comes to you with more ease and less resistance. We all know we're different, yet we're still acting like there's one way to do life. Let's talk about it. To find out your design and the designs of the people in your life, you can visit myhumandesign.com or download the My Human Design app in the App Store and on Google Play. This is something that is so weird of an experience to me because I'm usually such a chatty Cathy. Like, I can speak and talk and write and think and words all day long, normally. And right now it's so odd because I just feel like I don't have words. You know, normally if you follow me on Instagram, I can go on there and I'm storying all day and all this kind of thing. And at the moment, it's kind of like startling to my identity that I just don't feel like doing it. And I think that that's always a really good thing that the universe does to us when we are being challenged to grow, to make us feel into other ways about ourselves so that we can kind of explore that. And it's so interesting because I think what it's bringing up for us collectively, everybody at the moment, I'm seeing so many people say they're kind of not wanting to use social media as much, or deleting their app at night, or deleting it for days, or different people doing different things. But everyone is rethinking the way that they communicate in the world at the moment. And I kind of want to talk about it today because I think there's so much pressure that your only value is in what you say all the time. And to bring it back to a human design lens, there's actually so many other things that you do and other ways that you create value, the way that you move your life forward that isn't just sitting around and opining all day long. And so I thought this was a really good time, given that I don't have words, to talk about what's the meta of words.
Yeah, we've had this conversation where even I've like deleted apps off my phone and just keep getting this like message in my head of literally shut the fuck up, like stop talking so much, stop contributing things when you haven't even thought through if they're worth contributing. Like, that is kind of what the nature of social media is now. It feels like people are making something to say because they think they have to have something to say. And that's just not always the case. You don't always have something to say.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, it's making me think that maybe this is the universe's way of making us focus on quality over quantity. Because right now we live in a world which just rewards whoever shouts the loudest. And actually, I think we are kind of sick of being shouted at so much. and it's hitting us way less, right? Like, we're so overdrowned by noise that how would the universe course correct being overdrowned by noise is making every single individual rethink how much they say and what they say.
But how do we know, okay, this is a good spot to use human design of how do we know when we have something to say, when it's worth even contributing words?
Yeah, it's such a good question. We've done an episode about this before. What was that episode called? We're not all designed to speak our opinions. Yeah.
Yes.
And we have another one too.
I'll link both of them in the show notes.
But basically the idea is that there are so many things that you could use your voice for. And again, we have this conditioning of use your voice to be an activist or use your voice to speak about yourself. But actually, when you're looking at your own chart, you have to look at what in your chart, which energy centers are actually connecting to your throat by a full colored line. So for example, if your solar plexus, your emotional center, is connected to your throat, then it's speaking about things that move you. It's about sharing how your feelings, your emotions, your moods. When you have your spleen connected to your throat, it's about sharing what you instinctively feel called to speak, what you instinctively feel called to say. If it's your mind, your ajna center that's connected to your throat, then that's the person who's here to speak their viewpoint, their perspective, their opinions. So, and we go into detail on that in the episode, but I really I'm starting to wonder whether this moment in time is us all being pushed to reconsider the way that we use words. And if you imagine that every single word is a spell, every single word is concretizing a reality for you and for the people who are receiving it, we really have to take better sacredness when we do speak. And, you know, I think about the fact that I used to have a boyfriend that used to say to me, you're burning so many calories. He used to own a gym. He was like, you're burning so many calories because you speak like 20,000 words a day. Like, how are you not tired? And obviously that was said in jest, but I do think there is something to, it is an energy requirement. And because also we are calling back a lot of energy that is being wasted, it's not necessarily that we can stop talking altogether, right? Just like we can't stop eating altogether. So we're in this place that we have to start refining what's really worth saying, what's really worth adding to the conversation. What is a contribution that I'm making here? Whether it's, for example, to actually, you know, make someone else feel heard or add something interesting to life, but also to, you know, kind of sometimes get things off your chest or express yourself, right? But often words are a drug that we rely on almost as a way of validating the persona, as a way of filling empty spaces when we feel anxious, as a way of telling ourselves that we have answers when we maybe don't, as a way of being uncomfortable with silence. And so we just kind of fill that space. And it's really unbelievable how often when you start to notice how often you use empty words, it's truly unbelievable how often that's happening. But it's also beautiful to then say, let me practice being in silence. And you know what's crazy about being in silence is you kind of get to sit in your wisdom instead. So there's something really beautiful about that process.
And don't you think whenever we're looking at, like, we zoom out, you and I, in conversation, we're always kind of going, well, what would that shift in if people were more aligned in this way, what would that shift affect in the wider world? And right now, when people are speaking, when they're really not, they're just overusing speaking, it is just noise in the world. We can't even focus. No wonder we can't focus, because there's so much literal noise. Yeah. And I mean this too when you're saying in micro conversations. I'm learning that so I have my ajna connected to my throat. And if you're curious about which one is connected to your throat, if you go into the app and you tap any of the centers, they'll tell you what they're called. So mine is my ajna to my throat. So I'm meant to speak my opinions and perspectives, but I'm also a projector. So I'm only supposed to share those things when I've been invited to share them. And the more that I've done that, literally in my personal romantic relationship, in my friendships, in my family relationships, in just casual social conversations, I actually speak so much less than I ever have before, but I'm enjoying conversations so much more, and like my social experiences so much more.
Wow. I guess also because you really feel like what you're contributing is intentional, and therefore when it's intentional, it's going to be better quality. So you're feeding the conversation with better ingredients, so what's going to go into the mix is going to be better too. And also you give other people a higher step from which to jump back and feed you back into in many ways, because your ping pong game, right? Your side is a good serve, and then that gives them the ability to create another good serve. And so you're creating this upward cycle. And I think about how much of our homogenization is words, like how everyone starts sounding like each other, how few words we listen to because people use the same words over and over again. And again, that's because of conditioning, and we do that to belong, right? But originality is ultimately what stands out. So if you want to stand out, it's not about shouting the loudness, and it's certainly not about following algorithms. It's about sitting with a thought and genuinely expressing it the way that feels the most true in your heart, without needing to then engineer it or micromanage it or dress it up in a costume. And I say this without any sort of, personal attack on anyone, but if I see another POV reel, it goes in one ear and out the other because I've seen them so many times before. If I hear someone say it's giving, it's not perking me up to pay attention, because it's just following a funnel. And like you said, it's just noise in my face. And I think also we have to think about, you know, if you're using your voice at all to serve other people, right? Whether that's working in a team for a company, whether it's, you know, speaking for work or whatever it is, you have to think about, you are literally taking up space and time in someone's precious life. And space and time is the most important things, the only things we have, right? And so if we treat it with sacredness, other people are going to feel served so much more by what you do put in their time and space. And I think you're right, like it's contributing to all this overwhelm and this noise. It's like we can't even discern, because we're in a sea of it all the time.
Right. And I like that you bring up even just talking in teams, because I think it's easy to make the conversation about social media, because that is the platform where lots of noise is happening, but it really is in even our like teams. So the way you're supposed to speak is you speak guidance. So like even when you're speaking to us as a team, you're most effective when you are like speaking via the essence of guidance. Or is that the right, does that make sense when I explain it that way? It lands better in people. So like knowing the way that you're meant to speak, and then also knowing that that is in every area of your life, does just make you more effective too.
100%. And also because the part of my chart that animates my throat is actually connected very much to listening deeply as well. And so, and by the way, I say this because I definitely haven't gotten it right. And you know, when I speak my opinions, the projector bitterness absolutely comes out, and I get all uppity and judgy and whatever.
The tone of your
changes.
The tone of your voice.
Literally,
yeah.
my voice
Same.
changes. And we all know when we're being that way, you know? And it doesn't feel good. Ultimately, if you just want to make this a selfish endeavor, like it doesn't feel good to be that way, you know? And you feel empty. And it's a cheap hit to pretend that you are doing it to make other people feel like you have the answers and all this sort of thing. And honestly, the voice, the throat specifically in human design, is the one sort of outlet of energy, right? In many ways, inside the circuitry, the way that the whole energy system flows. And so it does give us that outlet, right? It makes us feel like we've released some pressure or some energy, right? And it's a very easy, quick way to do it. So sometimes when we do feel anxious or we do feel insecure, the first thing we do is yak on about it, right? But we know ultimately when we feel like we are just quickly giving ourselves that instant gratification of, if I convince you that I know all the answers, then at least it allays my fear that I might not have them, right? But in that dynamic, I'm abusing you, right? Only to stroke my ego. And so that's a net loss, right? That's, no one is winning out of that interaction. And I do really think that this might be what's going on for everybody right now.
Yeah. I think a good example too, because I love this conversation. I love that it's like even a third layer, new angle on this conversation, because I think it's so important to know how to use your voice. Even in our podcast, like as I have tweaked my contribution to it, knowing that how I'm meant to speak, it has actually even helped me. If you listen to the podcast, you'll hear that Jenna speaks guidance and I explain things. And I share my personal experience, because I have gift 35 in my chart, and I'm also a 3-5 profile. So I'm meant to share my experiences and speak my opinions. So when I learned that, even in these podcast episodes, I am so careful to either explain things or share my experience. I don't speak guidance. I avoid speaking guidance because it just doesn't land the same coming from me. So we land better too when we speak that way.
100%, because that's ultimately the mechanics of human design, is that we can feel other people's energy. And when people are using and signaling themselves in the way that we know their energy is, we receive them so much better. Like, it's when you know that someone is kind of being their real self, right? And so, you know, if I'm trying to talk about my opinions on things and I'm getting these like fixed perspectives, it doesn't land the same way than if I'm just helping guide. And, you know, it doesn't land the same way if I'm just saying, I wonder if this, or, you know, whatever it is that I can do with an open ajna. As I'm saying this, I'm hearing people say, what about people with an open throat? So I do want to cover people who have a throat center that is white, because really what that is your ability to pick up on what other people aren't saying, almost being a voice box for others, almost being actually able to have many different kinds of voices, none of which are actually inherently yours, but you can experience yourself having different voices at different times, different environments in your life. But a big pressure for people with open throats is that they have this insecurity that no one ever listens to them. And they can often be the people that shout the loudest because they're trying to fulfill this personal lie that no one listens, and they can end up taking up a lot of the airspace and airtime. But I also think generally for people among us who have the story that no one hears us, a way that we actually try to make that go away, right? Or try to confirm that is to speak a lot, either to be like, I'm going to make you listen, or to be like, see, I talked a lot and no one listened. So if that's a story of yours, I would really encourage you to be even more mindful about when you're trying to set up that game, because that's that narrative of yours that is trying to stay alive within you, basically.
I have a really good example of someone with an open throat and like a practical way of using it. My friend has an open throat. She's an interior designer. And what she's figured out is that with clients who can't like often explain what they're trying to accomplish with their house, she can kind of feel what they're trying to say when they can't get it out. They're like, well, the wall, she's able to go, you want it to do this? And they can get their clarity out via her feeling what they're trying to communicate.
Yeah, because everywhere that we're open is where we're able to pick up on what other people have going on in that same area and then amplify it. So it's a place where she's really in tune, empathic, psychic almost, right? Whatever the version of psychic is in a throat. But I love that she's figured that out, because that's such a good, tangible example of you have to be able, in order to be able to do that, you have to be free from always trying to speak what you think in order to pick up where you're open in your chart is where you're able to pick up on what other people are. And we all have open areas, right? So we have to use those and be receptive, but we have to clear this self-pressure on us to produce our own whatever that thing is, whether it's produce your own emotions if you're open emotional, or produce your own fears if you have an open spleen, produce your own voice and, have a defined throat if you have it open.
Right. I'm actually going to take us in another direction because I have a question about something to do with Kabbalah that I've actually seen come up in some of our Ask Jennas on the app. After we did the evil eye conversation, I think maybe David mentioned something about it in one of your episodes with him. When you're working on a project, to not speak about it until, what is that? Can you explain that? Because that is another layer of, not just like blabbing on about things all the time.
So it's so interesting, right? Because I think there's a lot of principles that are, 95% right 95% of the time, but then there's always nuance, and that's embedded into the laws of the universe so that no one has all the answers for everything, right? So even if something is absolutely true with a capital T, it completely depends on reading the situation and every single layer in that situation. So what was meant by that Kabbalistic principle is that you don't blab about things until they're done, because you don't want to attract other people kind of wishing it bad on you. And I also think there's probably an integrity piece in there too, where it's not about, all the talk. It's about be about it, don't talk about it, right? However, for example, because of nuance, if you were a manifester, that could maybe get in the way for you, because your job is to inform, right? And to actually not be so attached to the form that it takes, not be so attached to the ways that people react to it and the things that people do with what you say, right? So, and all manifestors have defined throats, because the throat is what rules their entire chart, which is why informing is their strategy for getting things done. It's just about saying whatever you feel the urge to say without knowing what it's making you do and what it's leading to. But just when you feel the urge to express something, you have to express it. And not think like, oh, what's the point? Where's this going? And so on and so forth. And again, I would look at, if you're an emotional manifestor, a splenic manifestor, an ego manifestor, these are all nuances within the nuance. But, I could think about that piece of advice and think about how it could be sometimes not applicable for a manifestor. I think that we especially America, tends to put too much emphasis on the marketing of things and maybe not enough on the substance. So that's another layer, right? And that's not a human design layer. That's just an energy layer of how the world is right now, right? And there's also a thing of overpromising and underdelivering, which even if you overpromise and underdeliver, even if the quality of what you deliver is great, you've already set the expectations higher, and so then people feel like it's less than what they thought it would be if you just naturally, organically let them interact with it without the spiel. So all of these things, and this is why I always encourage people to try on these principles, and it's not that any of them are wrong or right, it's just that when are they right? What are they right for? Who are they right for? And no one is going to give you the handbook to that. You have the handbook to yourself via your design and via your real essence. And then everything else that you see in the world, you have to interview to see whether it's a match for you, for who you really are, but also for you right now, you know? And this is where we always say to people, I always encourage people to like revisit their chart, because you genuinely, as your consciousness grows, you will understand the words in different ways. And then you'll be like, oh my gosh, of course, I never thought about it applying to this thing that I do in my life. And I always thought it was about this, or, you know, you'll see it in relation to the current context that you're in. And that's why it's so powerful, is it is so simple, and the ego wants to override that and overcomplicate spirituality, but actually it's about coming back to your real self over and over and becoming a better energy reader of yourself as you go. So I do think it's an amazing idea to not want to create evil eye on people just to feel like that's making traction for whatever you're about to do. You have to be careful with that kind of energetic hygiene as well. But then there are other people for whom speaking about things and shouting them loud from the rooftops is a good thing. For example, if you have enthusiasm as one of your gifts, you know, then actually it's not good for you to kind of play it cool. It's not good for you to not want to shout it from the rooftops. It's not, you know, you shouldn't try to be nonchalant about things. It's actually more magnetic when you allow that enthusiasm, that raw enthusiasm, not the cultivated enthusiasm, but just your raw enthusiasm for things, show itself into the world, right? And that can be scary too, because being overly enthusiastic is kind of uncool. You know, so we have this weird conditioning where we have to like speak about a lot of stuff, but we have to do it in a way that's kind of excited but not too excited. So then who's winning out of that formula, right? Like it's shunting everyone and contracting everyone's real way if we just let our natural self come out of us. Similarly, if you are supposed to be someone who, you know, is talking about unpleasant things, you know, you would have conditioning around, well, the only way that it gets received is like happy clappy, or vice versa, right? If you're really happy about things but you think you only have to talk about the crap in life, you know? So there's so many layers that we could go into this on, but the important thing is really to notice what your ego or your fear is telling you to do in the moment, and then to just create a little bit of a space there and say, just to investigate and be like, why is it telling me to do this? Did that come from me, or have I heard it from somewhere else before? If you've heard it from somewhere else, or you've seen it from somewhere else, that's a very good clue that it's probably not you.
Yeah. So do you think that this almost taking a second to be quiet and not use our voices so addictively is happening to benefit? I don't know what. What do you think?
I think the main thing is it's helping us all come into much more clarity on what we are signaling to the world, which ultimately that's what we do. We signal our essence, right? So are we being good ambassadors for what's really us? And I think people notice what we say more when we say less of it, when we only speak up when it's something that's true to us, because then it's honored that, you know, we're being responsible with our value add, our contribution. And I also think that on a collective level, it is the universe's way of lessening the noise, because everybody is struggling from having too much noise, and yet everybody is contributing to the problem. So if we want to feel less overwhelmed, if we want to feel like the world is less noisy, we start by each becoming less noisy. And so I feel like this is like a bit of a doorstop in this current way that we've been kind of doing it until now, where we've just been yabbering on, and that has actually served us probably in many ways, you know. And now there's just a rebalancing happening, and that's always how it goes in life. It's not that being quiet is better than being loud. It's just that everything goes in a cycle so that we can refine the type of being quiet, and we make that better, and we refine the type of speaking up. And I also do feel that the last 4 years, especially since lockdown, there's almost been too much noise. There's almost been too much speaking, because that was really the only major thing we could do being stuck at home. Is like, what are you going to do? You're going to watch more and you're going to say more, right? Because you're not running around. And so there's been a wonderful beauty in being slowed down to not run around. But now maybe we've overcompensated in the other way and performing too much with our words. And so maybe the universe is also bringing that back into a bit more of a correct, a way that feels calmer for us to speak. Like maybe we don't have to keep up with this, hamster wheel of just churning out words and mistaking that as being the only thing that we should cultivate.